Hello, BookTube. A little while ago, Matthew at Mayberry Book Club looked around the books in his personal home and asked, "Has Steve read all of these? Has he read all of these books?" And he went through his personal library and picked a handful of books, 8 books, that he thought maybe there was a chance that I hadn't read them. Uh, and he showed those books on camera, talked about them a bit, and then made that whole thing, that whole process into a tag where the goal of the tag is for you to pick 8 or 10 books from your personal collection that you think I might not have read. Tell us a little bit about them, and then put the challenge out there. Have I read them? And the whole thing is based on the fact that I read a freakish amount. I do now. I have for a very long time read a freakish amount. I read very fast. I devote huge chunks of the day and night to reading, and I always have. And nowadays, if anything, those numbers, those stats, that process is more purified than ever because I am a professional book critic. I don't do anything else. No side gigs, teaching or community theater or anything like that. No book contracts, no book tours, no inheritance, no wealthy teaching gigs. No, nothing like that. I don't do anything except review books. There are very few of us left who can make that claim. So all of my time is devoted to books, except for the intervals that I devote to Frida, to my bossy little miniature schnauzer. She has first claim to my time, but she's almost 3, and she doesn't want all that much of my time anymore. As long as I give her brisk interludes of activity and constant stimulation when she wants it, she's perfectly free. She's perfectly happy to just veg out for a lot of the time. As long as she's right next to me. She is right now right next to me. She is sleeping with the entire weight of her little body pressed against my lumbar region. But anyway, that is the underground challenge of the whole tag that Matthew came up with, is that why not measure your library against someone who has read so much, so many years in so many genres and so many little bolt holes of the reading world. And his tag took off. Apparently, a lot of you want to know, have I read certain books in your collections? And if so, what do I think about them? And I have made a practice here of making video responses to everyone who makes a video. I haven't done one yet for Matthew. He's been very forbearing, but I have done one for everyone else, and I intend to do one for everyone who does this tag, because mentioning and making a mention in the comments field just doesn't feel right. If we all have channels, if the other person has a channel, it feels right to make a video. So we have had contenders, because although this is a good-natured tag, nowhere else in YouTube, I maintain, could a tag like this have been developed that targets one person by name and not degenerated long before now into backbiting and name-calling and shaming and whatnot. And instead, there hasn't been the slightest inclination to do that. In this little group of friends that we have, everybody gets the humor, and that makes it all the better, because it means that the upshot is that we're seeing all these unusual books and getting a chance to jot them down. I'm jotting down quite a few. But Matthew, in his original video, only had 2 books out of his total that I had not read. And human nature being what it is, everyone has started to notice what each tally is. How well do people do? Matthew got 2. I think Brian at Bookish got 2. Samuel Darm got 3. A couple of people have got only 1. And Hannah at Hannah's Books got 4. And so far, hers is the highest number. So we're going to see, every time we have a new one of these, we see if the newcomer can knock off the queen. So let's see if we can. Today's contestant is Paul at PK's Books. And I don't know if you're familiar with his channel. I'll leave a link to his video down below. If you're not familiar with his channel or Matthew's channel, you should go and subscribe. Not that it tremendously matters, right? The conversation is what matters. The fun that we all have, sending each other things, wishing each other well. But still, as anybody can tell you who has done it, no matter how shallow it seems, there's a particular thrill in watching your subscriber count go up. I maintain that the magic moment is 4 digits, is 1,000. When you hit 1,000 subscribers, that is an amazing feeling, because when you hit 1,000 subscribers, you know for sure, no matter what kind of a social queen bee you are, you know for sure when you hit 1,000 subscribers that it's not just people you know, that it's not even your the 6 degrees of separation circles of people that you know. When you hit 1,000 subscribers, you know that you are reaching not just friends but an audience, and that's a great feeling. So go to their channels and subscribe, absolutely. Although with Paul's channel, PK's Books, you're gonna have to put up with all the shouting that he does and the stream of obscenities. He's very mild mannered, and boy does he pick great books to talk about. Let's see how good a job he did picking books this time around. So his first book was Fear by Ranulph Fiennes, and it's a yes for me. I have read this book. I've read everything, I think, by this author. He's a famous explorer, a famous knocker off of records and high barren peaks. I think he's been an Arctic and an Antarctic explorer both. He's climbed Everest. And in this book, he does what in the 21st century we would call subverting expectations. He writes a book about fear. And it's in a book about fear written by, the He-Man parka wearing wilderness explorer. You would think it would be all about laughing in the face of fear, ha ha ha, and overcoming fear. But it's really about fear. It's about how paralyzing it can be and how irrational it can be and where it can come from and how it manifests, including fears that he himself feels. So it's not what you would expect, and it didn't do anything for me. I don't know why, but nevertheless, I have read it. I did read it. I kind of like his, he has a kind of unvarnished prose style. It almost is unvarnished enough to make me think that he writes his own books. I'm not quite prepared to swear to that, but it almost feels that way. Certainly, if he has a ghostwriter, the ghostwriter has studied his speech mechanisms really well. Then the next one is also a yes. It's much closer to home. It's a yes for a number of reasons, but it's a yes also because it was a new book at a time when I was a working book critic, and that's going to be a very tough needle to thread. If you're doing a list like this, of course, there aren't any hard and fast rules. Sort of the informal rules are, you don't pick a book or books that you're picking because you know for sure that no one has read them. Books that are so bewilderingly obscure that it's almost unfair to mention them. That's one maybe unwritten rule. Another maybe unwritten rule, just to make things easier, would be to stick to English, stick to books written in English. It's not a restriction for my reading at all, but it might make more sense to do that. It might be a little bit neater. But one of the cautions that you want to exercise here. I know the joke with my friends forever has been dead Romans, dead Kennedys, and dogs. but in addition to that, you want to be very careful if you pick a book that was a high-profile, major publisher, new release during the years this marvelous second stage in my reviewing career. You want to be careful if you pick such a book, because I will almost certainly have read it. It's my whole goal. It's my whole life now. I don't read anything else. I don't read backlist except to shore up my reading of frontlist. And the book in question is On the Move by Oliver Sacks, which is his book largely about his early life, with a picture of himself on the cover as a super hottie. And I have read it. I did think that it was quite good. And then the next one, in every one of these lists so far, without fail, there has been at least one book on the list where my reaction is not just, yes, I have read this, but also after a second of just blinking, the reaction of, what on earth was this person thinking to assume in any way that I hadn't read this book? It's self-evident. I mean, Oliver Sacks, for a number of reasons, is pretty evident, but this next one, I ask you can practically make it out right over my shoulder. This is the Letters of Vincent van Gogh in the Penguin Classic Edition. I would argue, the most vociferous Penguin Classic fan in the world today. So I have read the Penguin Classic Edition of the Letters of Vincent van Gogh. In fact, I think I showed it on this channel. So that's a yes. The next one is a no. The Politics of Experience and also The Bird of Paradise, both by R.D. Laing. And the reason that Paul mentions them together is because I think they were printed as together in one book. I haven't read anything by R.D. Laing. His reputation precedes him, and so I have been cautious. I imagine that will change. I've heard rumors that there's going to be a big biography. Probably not next year, but when a major biography or a major critical study arises, that will probably be the reason that will make me do it. But so far, no. So that is a no. And this next one is also a no, and I could kick myself for it. It's A People's History of St. Kilda by Roger Hutchinson. And it sounds fantastic. It's a history of a set of forbidding and bewilderingly beautiful islands in the Hebrides that I have. The reason I could kick myself is because unlike virtually anybody else that you're ever going to meet, I've actually been there. And this was a long time ago, so I don't think I'm getting anybody in trouble. I'm pretty sure that the people who allowed it are all dead. Not only have I been there and tramped all around, but I actually managed. It wasn't easy to do. It required both greasing of the wheels with money and also a fairly high-placed recommendation, a fairly high-placed little bit of elbow jostling from. I've only used that high-placed thing a couple of times. That particular person. Not only did I visit and tramp around in the interior, I brought beagles. That's unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. The whole place is just a swarm with animals on the brink of extinction. The whole thing is a gigantic nature preserve. It was a proud moment. So I know the area. I know the area really, really well. And I haven't read this book. So now I feel really bad. I want to read this book. I'm sure I learned a lot about the area from the people that I visited when I was there, and the people that I met when I was there. All sorts of experts told me everything in the world. Of course, my first question was, are there bats? And there weren't any bats. But I also wanted to know if there were sharks. And what about whale visitation? And what about life on these islands in prehistoric times? What about, is there anything like, these are the tops of mountains, obviously, so is there anything like a paleontological record? And all sorts of other things, what the weather was like, what it's like to live there, all that sort of stuff. So I want to read this book, but it's a no. I haven't read it. Didn't even know it existed before Paul's video. Then the next one is Mary Shelley, a biography by Miranda Seymour. This one's a little bit strange. I have read it. Mary Shelley's life is fascinating. So when biographies come out of her or George Eliot or Jane Austen or the Bronte sisters, I read them. Just as a matter of course I do. But the next one is a no. The next one is Winning Is Not Enough by Jackie Stewart. I haven't read it. Don't think I've ever held a copy in my hand. And then the final one is a yes, and that is Rickenbacker, the autobiography of Captain Eddie Rickenbacker, the World War I fighting ace, the World War II. Just a genuine, like the first one, like Ranulph Fiennes, a genuinely larger-than-life biography. A larger-than-life figure. Someone who lived an adventure story. And that is always fascinating. Of course, Rickenbacker, I would have read him anyway, even if the rest of his life he'd been a stockbroker. I would still have read the rest. I would still have read it just for World War I alone. But his autobiography, of course, he didn't write a word of it, but whoever did a really good job. It has some really neat bits to it. It manages to keep you interested all throughout, even when there's no Sopwith Camel action going on. So I did read it. If it came out again, if somebody did a nice reprint of it with the same heroic cover as the edition that I read, but maybe a new critical introduction or notes or something like that, I would love it. I would gobble it up in a minute. And that is it. That is the PK's Books edition of the Have Steve Read It tag. And if you've been keeping track at home, you realize that his tally is 3. That is 3 books that I have not read. And for this tag, unbelievably, after all this time, that is a pretty good tally. That is not bad at all. That's not 1 and it's not 0. But, unfortunately, it's also not 4. 4 is the tally of the still uninterrupted queen of this whole tag. So Paul made his tag and he sent his choices out into the void. And then he heard someone clear her throat. And he looked up, and it was Hannah, leaning on the arm of her throne, looking down at Paul, and saying, A serf you were born, a serf you have lived, and a serf you will continue to be. It's a rough game. What can I say? So Hannah's books, I will leave a link to her channel down below as well. She's still in the lead at 4, but there are many, many more. There are many, many more challengers to come, including some members of my own beloved OGBG. So that could change. Stay tuned. Thank you, BookTube.